Hi everyone. In this lecture, I will continue with web client implementation. Now let's create a package service in the Elastic Query Web Client and then create Elastic Query Web Client interface. In this interface, I will have a single method getDataByText that takes Elastic Query Web Client request model as parameter and return list of Elastic Query Web Client response model objects. And then I will create the Twitter Elastic Query Web Client implementation class for this interface under the impl package. This class will be annotated with service annotation, so it will be a Spring managed bean. Here I will implement Elastic Query Web Client and override getDataByText method. Let's start by creating a logger using logger factory. Then I will inject Web Client Builder that we have created in the previous section, and then the Web Client configuration, Elastic Query Web Client config data. I will use constructor injection to inject these two fields. Now before continue, I will first update the Web Client configuration in config server repository and add a prefix query_by_text and set the HTTP method URI and accept type specific to the call that I will make from this web client. I will use post method, set the URI using getDocumentByText, which is defined in the Elastic Document Controller, and then set the accept type. And for this, as you can see, I can use a replacement using $ and the parentheses to use a previously defined property in the YAML file, so I will use Elastic Query Web Client accept type property here. Let's also update the corresponding config data class and create another nested class called query. And I will add properties method, accept, and URI in this query class. Then I will create query_by_text property on the top level class with the type query. Please don't forget to commit and push your changes for config server repository now. So I will use git commit -am command and pass a message. Then I will push my changes under the config server repository folder. Alright, at this point, we will learn to use qualifier annotation to inject a specific implementation of an interface. We need this here because there is the default Web Client Builder implementation of Web Client Builder comes by Spring library. But here I want to inject our customized builder. So I use qualifier annotation here in the constructor and inject the bean that we have created in the Web Client config class. As you see, I use Web Client Builder name for the bean definition in this configuration. Let's now implement getDataByText method. First, I will log an info message in this method, printing the text of the request model. Then I want to create a new private method here to create the web client. And I will pass the request object to these methods. So let's create getWebClient methods that will return WebClient response spec object. And then inside these methods, I will build the web client with the provided configuration properties. I will read method, URI, and accept from the query_by_text configuration. For request body, I use body inserts from publisher method here and pass a mono object by creating it from the request object. Then I will also specify a parameterized type reference here. For that, let's create a method and use that. This way, I pass the request object using the parameterized type reference to the web client. Body inserts is an interface responsible for populating a reactive HTTP output message body with a given output message and a context. And the publisher that is used with FromPublisher method is a reactive component and provides sequenced elements that are potentially unbounded. Since web client is a reactive client and works with reactive types, in this reactive web client, I need to work with reactive types like mono for a single data and flux for a list of data. Then let's call the retrieve method and set different onStatus methods for different responses returned. And I will set different error messages inside these different methods. Let's now call this method from getDataByText method. Since this request will return more than one data, I will use bodyToFlux method with parameter Elastic Query Web Client Response Model, and then collect it to a list. In the end, I will call block method as I want to get the response immediately, meaning synchronously in this scenario. Without this block method call, it will not return immediately, and I need to create some callback methods which will be called later asynchronously. Alright, let's now update the controller and call the web client by injecting it. As mentioned previously, here we see that we are passing a model as a parameter to the controller method, and this is the object we communicate with the timeleaf template. Here, when I add some objects to this model, I can reach them in the timeleaf template. For example, when I add this Elastic Query Web Client Response model list and return to the home template, I will be able to iterate over this list and then show on the HTML page. Let's delete the mock data now here as we don't need it anymore. Let's run the web client now. But please note that until we configure load balancer, I will use the direct localhost access to reach the query service. So let's update the base URL of web client in the config and commit and push the changes. For the base URL, I will use localhost 8183 with context path Elastic Query Service and URI documents. And this time, I will first run Elastic cluster and then the query service as well as the config server before running the web client. Then I can run the web client and search some text. I will open the browser and try to search some data. I should be able to see the real results from Elasticsearch now. As you see, I get the results from Elasticsearch. Alright, in the next lecture, we will continue adding a client-side load balancer. So I will see you in the next lecture.